There's a legend in these parts about Bigfoot. As he was wandering through the forest, he thought about having a podcast. Then he walked and thought and walked and thought. Then he came across a little bunny and he pondered, I wonder if that bunny would be my co-host. And the rest, it was history.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to Dark Horse Paranormal. I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I am Kristen Johnson.
Hey, how you doing? Happy Thirsty Thursday. We've got our water and other beverages. Hope you're doing well. It's been a pretty rough week in the news and all of that. And we don't want to get political, get into all that, but we do want to say our hearts go out to all the people who are suffering in the world. And wow, what a time. What a crazy fucking time it is in the world. We're going to escape from that for an hour or so and turn the news off just for a little bit. We're going to talk about some things. Tomorrow is Friday the 13th, and we have just the right person to talk to about just that and about ghostly curses. He's no stranger to our show. His name is Christopher Balzano. If he wants to be Christopher, he certainly can be. He's a writer, researcher, folklorist, and current host of the podcast Tripping on Legends. He's been documenting the unexplained since 1994, has been a figure in the paranormal world through his books, articles, and his work as the director of the Massachusetts Paranormal Crossroads and now Tripping on Legends. He is the author of several books about regional hauntings, dark woods, cults, and crime, about Freetown forests, which I know at least some of you are familiar with. Super great book about that, and Ghosts of the Bridgewater Triangle, which is kind of where we live. We're kind of on the outskirts of that. And they certainly are in a haunted area. His collections of true ghost stories, ghostly adventures, and how-to paranormal books, including the first paranormal book I ever read, which was Picture Yourself Ghost Hunting. He's been a contributor to Jeff Belanger's Encyclopedia of Haunted Places in Weird, Massachusetts, and was one of the writers behind Weird Hauntings. He has appeared in more than a dozen other books, often called in to offer insight into the paranormal of perspective on a certain case. He's appeared on radio stations across the country, as well as the internet, and being called upon by TV shows to comment on ghosts and urban legends, including British television series Conversations with a Serial Killer. He has been a guest on Coast to Coast AM and been asked in as a consultant on television shows like Paranormal State and Ghost Adventures. He formerly ran the Paranormal News and Ghost Village for kids from Ghost Village, one of the oldest and largest websites dedicated to the paranormal. and is the content director for the very popular paranormal radio show, and a fantastic one at that. Huge influence on all shows like this one, Spooky South Coast. So let's bring him right on. We'll get to things. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Sorry, I fell asleep listening about myself. You guys got to get the short bio. It's too long.
It's a little bit. I abbreviated a little bit.
Oh, okay, all right. No, that's really too long. Way too much talk about me.
Well, we don't mind. We like talking about you, but it's always good stuff. So
That's
Sure.
right.
welcome back. I think it's been about a year since you were on our humble show, and
It's always a good
you've
time.
become
Always a good time.
an October favorite because this is spooky season, and
It is.
know
I mean,
you
not that
always
I don't love you guys, but this is like my third interview today, sandwiched around 4 different events. So yes, this is the time of year when what I do is no longer weird and everyone else is running to catch up with me. So I always enjoy it.
Excellent. Well, lots of folks out there. I see Carol, Victoria, Anne-Marie Young, Jack Kilowatt, Mr. Bob Burnell, and Kimberly Horn. Kim, how you doing? Everybody's saying hello, and yeah, thank you for joining us tonight.
Ronnie Anderson. Yep. Hello.
What's happening? So how have you been? What have you been up to? What's new?
Good. Nothing much. It's the same old. It's crazy. You know, I think last time I was on, I was talking about 2 books I was working on, and one book is like a complete passion project, right? And I can tell you about it if you want, but the
Absolutely.
the point of this story is people. It's about. So I wrote the Haunted Ocala National Forest book. And I had probably about, another half book just on this one area that's kind of outside of the Ocala National Forest. And it all starts with a story of a swamp witch. And it's in Sumter County, Florida. Originally, Hog Island was what we were saying when we put it forward. And it's this absolutely amazing haunted legend, I should say, that I want to tell to the audience, right? And I can't tell that story without telling you 23 other stories. So it's a ghost story that's supposed to be a straight line, but like a really good ghost story. It goes this way and that way and this way, and it's all about the way that I'm telling it and all of these different stories and how they're interconnected and all these different aspects of it. And it's absolutely it's a terror to write because it's such a beast. But it's so enjoyable because I'm allowed to play the storyteller and the folklorist at the same time, and I actually play off of each other, like those 2 methods of telling a story, and I love it, and it brings me joy, and then everything keeps derailing it. So I was asked to write a book, the kids' version of the Haunted Ocala book. So every time I try to work on this project and really try to get it done, something else like comes up and forces me to put the book I really, really, really want to do away for a little bit. So we're talking curses. I feel like that book is cursed. Like there's something somewhere out there that doesn't want me to write it, you know?
Maybe.
So,
Well, I do like a good tale about a swamp witch for sure.
Well, and it encompasses so much of that area because it's the story. The story takes place in a town that doesn't exist anymore. And not only does this town known as Pemberton Ferry not exist anymore, there's almost no record of it. The only way that you can find references to it, and even in Sumter County, you have people who lived in Pemberton Ferry when they were kids that don't remember the name Pemberton Ferry. It's like this amnesia that's hit the entire area, and they don't talk about the ghosts in the area. They don't talk about evil things. They don't talk about. So there's all these great ghost stories that kind of bubble to the surface and that are intentionally suppressed. And don't talk about that. And then literally right across the river is an entirely different county, and they're out there having like paranormal TV shows, and they're promoting it, and then all this stuff like that. And so it's this really interesting mix between the two of like, well, why is one city, and there's 2 cities were cities, right? like if anyone is in Florida, the town of Brooksville is the city, the sister city, and that was modeled after Pemberton Ferry. Pemberton Ferry fails, Brooksville succeeds. It totally embraces its ghosts. The other right over the Walloothahachie, they don't talk about ghosts at all. And so it's this really interesting exploration of like, why is that? What is something trying to keep this witch or what's going on there or the darkness there suppressed? And it ends into all these different things. For example, this is misinformation, but every website talks about this witch of Hog Island, as being the inspiration for the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, wow.
And I heard that, and it didn't seem to make sense to me, right? Because I know everything there is to know about the Blair Witch Project. I know I was obsessed with it before it came out. I got a copy of it like 6 months before it was in the theater and people really knew about it. And I used to show people the movie and tell them it was real and totally freak them out, right? And so I knew like what was the foundation of that movie and where they got the idea. But the filmmakers were from UCF, right? They studied at UCF. And supposedly this guy named Charlie Carlson, who is the folklore, especially haunted, weird folklore guru down here. He's passed away since. The story goes that they heard him speak on campus once. They heard him say this story, and they were like, "Let's base a movie on that." Like, right? Like, and I was like, "Wait, I know that's not how it went. I know what inspired that movie. I know their whole creative process. Not to mention the fact Charlie Carlson wrote his Weird Florida after the movie came out. So if your story is the inspiration for the Blair Witch Project, why is it not in Weird Florida?
Right.
But the added twist of it is that he appears in the documentary. Are you guys Blair Witch Project fans?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, how they had that movie, I think it was called The Curse of Burkittsville, where they had a mockumentary about all the history leading into the Blair Witch Project and the child murder and the witch and stuff like that. And he's in that movie as a folklorist. And so they were like, that's the proof. That's the proof. And it's funny because about 2 years ago today, I was at an event and he was speaking, and I have a copy of the original movie, 2 hours long, unedited. The copy that I got like 6 months ahead of time, and he hadn't seen that cut in 20 years. And so when he found out I had it and I had this question, he asked me to come in and have pizza and beer with him. And we talked for about 2 hours about horror movies, about the origins of the Blair Witch. And he says flat out, this is not the inspiration for the Blair Witch Project. But there's something so universal about this story. There's something so connected and draws people in that it makes complete sense to people. And the story seems very familiar because it's really a haunted legend that repeats itself over and over and over again.
Wow.
Interesting. Almost like it took on a life of its own.
That's exactly what it is. And that's why I say it. So you see me, that's just one story, and it took me however long to tell it. And I haven't even told you about anything about the witch yet. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the beauty of this book. But it seems like there are forces out there that don't want me to finish it.
I think I remember reading something about that in the Ocala Forest book. I think you touched on it. I think you talked to somebody who was telling you a story from the area, but she had to say it like kind of on the down low, like she didn't want.
Oh no, no. So no, what happened is that the Ocala, just like Freetown, right? The Ocala is Freetown, but the Ocala is much larger and much more intense and because of its location as really a go-between the east coast of Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of drugs running that way, a lot of human trafficking going that way, a lot of really bad stuff. There were certain gangs running out of Daytona that are responsible for a lot of the disappearances and a lot of the cult activity in the forest. And so someone wanted to tell me this and give me some evidence. Wow. I love this. This is like CIA kind of stuff. And so they messaged me. They posted on my post about the Ocala, I will message you in like 8 minutes. No, I will message you. I will keep it up for 8 minutes and then I'm taking it down. And so I went in and I read all the stuff that they said. They said, please respect, don't screenshot it. And so I got I wrote all the information down, and then 10 minutes later, they had deleted their Facebook account entirely.
Wow.
And it was really kind of like laying out some of the gang activity that's responsible for some of the true crime and kind of weird culty stuff that's happening in the Ocala National Forest.
And that's a big forest. I mean, people can disappear in there. You can take a walk in there and never be seen again.
Yeah. And there's a lot of spooky there, but there's a lot of not dead spooky there as well. And a lot of people go missing there every single year. I always tell people, if you just listen to any broadcast, like just listen to a Florida news broadcast for the entire broadcast from beginning to end. And if they don't say the word Ocala once, I'll send you a free copy of the book.
Wow.
Right.
That's just how connected it is to all these different kind of crimes and different things that are going on.
Was it a biker gang?
I'm not saying anything more. What are you, crazy?
No.
I haven't had, like, when I wrote Dark Woods, I actually had cult members who were getting in contact with me. I had the serial killer, but the murderer, Carl Drew, convicted murderer, although he probably didn't do it, drawing me pictures and sending me artwork. I have not had any of that kind of pushback from anything associated with the Ocala yet. So thank heavens, knock on wood.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, we certainly know a lot of people have expired in the Freetown State Forest.
Yes.
Yeah, so crime and other reasons. Just
Same thing, cults.
Yeah, and both of those books kind of have the same heart, which is the same thing that are causing all of these mysterious, supernatural, and paranormal things to happen. Could it also be the reason why there are these weird crimes and cults find their way there and things like that? Like, is it the same energy? Do we see Bigfoot and UFOs for the same reason that for a while 24 was the most was the deadliest stretch of highway in the country? Like they had the most fatalities per accident of any road in the United States. Like, is there something to higher divorce rates, higher? And the funny thing is that I found, for example, in Fort King, which is in the town of Ocala, everyone in the neighborhood, like within a mile radius of Fort King, there are like 2 other famously haunted locations that are next to Fort King as well. And then everyone believes like there's a higher rate of teen suicide. People get sick, like with cancer and stuff like that around Fort King. And they all believe that it is this cursed area.
The energy.
Interesting.
It's like, we were talking before about how it like attracts the negative energy.
Yeah, I mean, you already are in the Ocala National Forest, right? So there's that. But when they built Fort King, they dug up the graves or plowed over like mounds and stuff like that of the tribe that had lived there, which is ironic because they built Fort King to support the Native American, the Seminole like Friendship Center, which was across the street, right? Which became the Seminole Relocation Center, right? And then when people died at Fort King during the Second Seminole War, especially that opening day where Thomas Wiley was shot by Osceola while he was outside having a cigarette and all this kind of like, all those people were buried in the same exact spot where the Seminole, or not Seminole, but older Native American graves had been kept, right? And so now you have graves upon graves, and the entire thing as a whole was dug up and sent to St. Augustine for the first national cemetery in St. Augustine. So now you have big, graves over graves dug up in a place that's already known for being this weird, cursed kind of area, and you don't expect to see a ghost. You don't expect to have weird things happen.
Right, exactly. And of course, they're going to.
Yeah.
At least they tried to move them, and that's a good thing.
I mean, overall, it's once again, so that connects. See, this connects to what I was talking about before, because in what used to be Pemberton Ferry, there was a famous battle that started like at the same time that this was happening at Fort King, like literally the same day. There was an ambush known as the Dade Massacre. And of the 110 people who were on this march to go to Fort King, 108 of them were killed in this one little location, like, not even like the size of a basketball court, maybe. And those people were buried where they were, and then they were dug up and they were combined with the people who had died at Fort King. Fort King, ridiculously haunted. The site of the Dade Massacre in Sumter County, nothing. No stories of ghosts, no weird feeling when you get there. They do a reenactment, and I've never been to a reenactment where you didn't get a sense that like the spirits of the past were like over your shoulder. Nothing, no whispers of it whatsoever. We've done, my kids and I actually went there during the lockdown because we were allowed access, and we did EVP sessions, and nothing, like there's no talk of ghosts there whatsoever. And yet this other place, same day, similar events happening there, ridiculously haunted.
Wow.
Cheapers.
Yeah, Al Serrano notes that St. Augustine is built over the dead. They put roads, etc. Probably never moved them.
Yeah, St. Augustine is its own, fun little place in and of itself. So
Carol says she had a hard time breathing there. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, all I know about St. Augustine, like obviously I've done a ridiculous amount of research, but I don't cover St. Augustine because everyone does St. Augustine, and I like to do the stories that are less well known. Mm-hmm. All I do know is I was doing an event in the next town over from St. Augustine, and so we drove like the 8 hours it took for us to get to St. Augustine. And we drive in there, and we've got this hotel room. There was 2 nights in this hotel room. We pull up, and our GPS just kind of dies on us. We can't find the hotel. We put it into the GPS again. It says the hotel is permanently closed. It doesn't exist. There's literally no building like where the GPS has sent us. We checked the address 23 times. Go to complain to the bank about it, because I got it through my bank points. They're like, nope, we're literally talking to the front desk right now. And I'm like, we were there. So I don't know if we were part of the, time shifts that happened in that area or what, the time slips, but I lost a lot of credit card points not being able to stay at the hotel that night.
Jeez.
Wow. That's so strange. And that time slip thing does come up again and again in different areas, which is just so strange. And it's like, what people mention when they talk about alien abduction is like losing time. And yet there are areas that seem to be able to have that same kind of effect.
Yeah, I had my first one after I was doing some co-hosting duties on Spooky South Coast, right? And so I'm driving through the Bridgewater Triangle, and the show is over at midnight, and I'm waiting, and it's back in the day, if people remember, back in the day, Coast to Coast used to follow the daylight savings time, right? So it used to either come on at 1 or it came on at 2. And this was it coming on at 2. And I'm driving down the road. I'm driving down, I can't remember which one it was, down the road being like, oh, I can't wait to listen to Coast to Coast. Can't wait to listen to Coast to Coast. And then instantly it's in the middle of its second hour. I look down, it's 2-something in the morning. And I'm like, I literally just left the studio like 5 minutes ago. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think I just had thrown a cigarette out the window, and then all of a sudden I'm flashed, and it's like I had lost an entire hour of time in the Bridgewater Triangle.
Well, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
It's definitely a haunted area. And as we've said before with you, I think on the show, the triangle itself is just not really big enough to encompass the whole area that just seems to have, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of haunts. We're in Rhode Island right now. Yeah, we're in Manville, right near the Blackstone River, and there's a train track that runs down. There's all this kind of weird energy in this area. I had a haunted experience as a child, like, I don't know, 2 blocks from here. My parents had a house.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculous. And the haunted childhood thing. And I think it all contributes.
And I think it was originally put out there in this very nice, neat package. And that's kind of like, it was the idea that there was something weird going on. That was the sellable point. Right. And so to be able to define it through these clear boundaries was comfortable. But Coleman himself has said that like, that was a template. So, it does expand. It's not just between those 3 towns. I mean, it is that area as a whole. Sure.
Mm-hmm. And certainly the battles between the indigenous folk and King Philip's War, raged all through New England. So, right into Rhode Island to Narragansett was one of their biggest battles when they had to retreat into the swamps there. And speaking of swamps, I don't think you quite got to that swamp.
No, you did not. 23 stories, right? Yeah, you're right.
Right.
I avoid swamps at all costs. I really don't. I keep getting drawn back into swamps here. And then what I realized was that all of Florida is just one big swamp. It's either the ocean or it's a swamp. Like everything is, and you have to kind of understand that like that shapes the stories that people tell, because you don't have these apple grove things. You don't have these. Instead, you have, it happened in a swamp, or, you have skunk ape, which smells horrible because it's swamp.
Right.
So
Sure. I had an old hag experience, and the old hag, crone, witch, whatever we want to call her, was in the swamp when it happened.
Wait, you were in the swamp when it happened, or she was in the swamp?
She was in the swamp.
What do you mean? You totally have to explain that. That's
okay. The old hag experience it's a common.
Yeah. No, I understand old hag, but what do you mean she was in the swamp?
It all happened in a swamp, and I just got pulled away from her. I knew I was like out of body. I was having an out of body experience before, like familiar with that feeling and sensation, and I couldn't breathe. I wasn't necessarily under the water of the swamp, like a lot of people talk about drowning and these sort of things, but I did feel like I couldn't breathe. And as she kind of went out of my view and I was trying to wake up and get back into my body, I just felt like I was suffocating. And but that's the scene I saw. It's just like stereotypical crone, the swamp around her, and she's just looking me in the eye, not even saying anything. And I'm just scared shitless because I get that feeling like this is the end of the world. I'm gonna die. Right. Without a word, I'm gonna die.
Yeah. Like you said, the interesting thing of that was the out of body experience part, because usually it happens, in the confines of your room or something like that. So
it wasn't sitting on my chest. It wasn't any of that. I was in a different environment, and I just had this, I don't know, I'll call it lucid dream astral experience, because I'm not sure how I kind of got into it. I think I was having a dream that was kind of a lucid, like awareness. And then just somehow I end up with this hag in the swamp, and she's just looking at me, and I'm looking back at her, and I'm like, oh, I'm screwed. I'm done. And I'm trying to get back to the body, and like everything's kind of black, and I can't breathe, and I woke up with that thing,
Yeah, in Dark Woods, I wrote there's a whole story about a group of prepubescent boys, like kind of into their teenage years, who are all having nightmares exactly how you're talking. And they all seem to revolve, instead of around a swamp, because it's, although it is right next to the cranberry bog, this house, this woman's house, and it's burnt down, and there's this foundation and stuff like that. And they never talked about it. And then one by one, they started kind of sharing details of it. And they found the foundation in the woods. And this woman, this witch, had been torturing them for years. And it wasn't until they started talking about it that she kind of went away. And it's interesting because, you hear the story and people say, oh, well, that's just, it's a fake story. And come on, some kids were having the same dream and blah, 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 blah. That was a haunting that was extremely real for those kids. And I know that because I went with the kid who wasn't a kid anymore. He was in his 20s, went back to his old family house from when he was a kid. We went through the woods. We went to the foundation. And this kid was choked up. He was almost in tears. And he was going through this cathartic process of exercising those memories. And it was a complete blessing for him to take me to do this, because I was kind of offering him protection. And when we left, he said it completely changed his life. Like all that horrible stuff, that kind of those scars that had formed from having this experience and knowing that other people had had it, and then finding the foundation and all was completely washed away. And he thanked me for taking him out into the woods to get a wicked good story.
I love that you just said wicked good story.
Yes.
Yeah, it felt fitting.
You might live in Florida now, but you are a New Englander.
Oh, I am a New Englander. I don't know. I'm not a Floridian. Don't ever call me that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think you also re-released Haunted Objects, the book you did with Tim Weisberg, speaking of spooky South Coast, right? I've got an original back there on the shelf.
Yeah.
It was a disaster. So
we
I love the idea of that book. The book failed, right? if we're talking about a cursed object, like the book itself might be a cursed object. It was offered to Jeff Belanger to write, right? And he turned it down. He said, I think I got someone who can work on it. Chris Balzano, he's published a few other things. Contact him. And so they contacted me, and I had just had my daughter. The school year was starting up, and I'm like, I can do it if you let me do a co-author. And they said, okay. And so I brought Tim in, and then they didn't sign the contract for like a year. Well, like if you had given me a year, I wouldn't have needed that guy. You know what I'm saying? I could have done it myself. But it was an absolute amazing journey to write this book. Tim and I realized this when I was working on re-releasing it, completely different writers. You can clearly tell which story is which, right? The book totally bombed, failed. And the rights ended up through a series of weird things. The rights came back to us. And so I had spent last summer, my summer off, formatting the book so we could re-release it, independently produce it, like independently publish it. As I'm reading the book, I know why it failed. When it first came out, I think it was 12 years ago now, when it first came out, the world wanted a clear separation between its folklore and its ghosts, right? It was kind of the heyday ratings-wise and just sheer number of ghost investigating shows that were out there, right? And all those ghost shows were pushing the same idea, which is, the ghosts aren't, like you have to prove that the ghosts aren't real. You have to prove it on. There's skepticism is best. Here's a cold hard facts. You have to prove it this way. Here's the method that you use, and all those things. And then on the side was the ghostly folklore that we'd all grown up with that we loved, right? And what was not good about this book, or which was controversial, I think, not controversial in a cool, sexy way, controversial in a, people didn't like it way, was that haunted objects mixes the two, right? And it lets those two things stand next to each other. So in the same chapter, we begin talking about James Dean and his cursed spider, right? That went off to become a murder car for all these other people as the parts were put into different cars, right? And then we talk about King Ferdinand, right? Who the same thing happened. He was assassinated. The car that he was assassinated in was given to someone else, and they were killed. And then it was taken apart, and all these. And then we put it next to someone who's having a haunted car experience, like who felt that their car was cursed. And people, I think, we're looking at it now, we go like, oh, that's really cool. I think people didn't like that. People wanted very clear, concise things of like why are you talking about James Dean and then you're talking about someone's house? Like, don't do that. Those are two different things. And we were all excited. We got an amazing cover for it. I sent it out. I was having a gig that weekend. This was a few weeks ago. So I got 10 copies for me so I could sell them at the gig, right? And I got them, and the writing was about, this looks like the back of a medicine bottle, right? So it totally messed up. The printing looks absolutely horrible. And I'm like, I can't believe, after all this work, I've got to go back and redo the entire thing because the formatting didn't work out. So, and of course, it's spooky season. What am I going to get? And I've got a book that I've got to finish for another publisher. Like, when am I going to get back to making it, fit on the page the right way? So it is the book that refuses to be sold.
Wow. Well,
and I love the book. I think it's an amazing book. Like, anyone out here who's listening, contact me. I'll send you a PDF. It's amazing. It's a great book.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, being able to look back on it with kind of the knowledge of the last 12 years and how the paranormal field has gone and how paranormal ideas have evolved, even in the last decade, was a fun treat, right? To look at that, and it made me think of all these interesting things. And we updated some of the stories, and we updated our information about Robert and all that kind of stuff. And it's almost like it doesn't want to be released. It's like it refuses to pay pay out for me.
That's funny. It's weird. Sad but funny, and it does that. And of course, it is a haunted objects book.
It's a book about haunted. It's an absolutely beautiful book. Like, the new cover is amazing. It's so up to date. Like, the old one was just that spooky doll with like the eye in the corner, which was cool, right? Like, people are always drawn to it. I have literally given away 7 of the 10 copies because I just display it when I do events. And then if someone's really nice to me, I go, here you go. Do you have good eyes? Here you go. Here's a free copy of a book. I can't do anything with it.
Oh, I had to pay for mine, damn it.
It's also really good to give away like on dates. You know what I'm saying? Be like, hey, baby, I wrote a book. Like, here you go. Here's a signed copy instead of flowers, you know?
That's true. Here's an autographed copy of my book.
Hey, baby. And then I thought we said, may all your love be haunted. That's when, when I signed it. So
Love it.
Oh, that's some good stuff. That's some good stuff. And of course, you're the guy that more or less, and we won't stay on this topic too much because you've got to be sick about talking about them, who brought the word Pukwudgie into the limelight.
Yes.
For those that don't know, maybe didn't see our show last year or the year before that.
yes.
Are you still hearing Pukwudgie stories?
Yes, I am. And it's interesting I am a 100% voyeur to Pukwudgie stories now, right? Like there's no trace of me unless you dig on them at all, right? People don't know. It's funny because when I post something about a Pukwudgie on something that is, open to everybody, that everyone can comment, I literally have people correcting me on my details, right?
Oh,
Which I always dig like, that's not, what a Pukwudgie does. I'm like, oh, really? Where did you find that out? And then they reference me, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But I think this
full circle.
Right. Which I think as a folklorist, I find totally cool, right? Like, oh, that guy right there, that's the guy you're talking about. And then I'll take a screenshot of myself, like a selfie of myself and send it to them. Their stories never stop. The stories keep coming through, especially in Southeast Massachusetts. There are some people who are, boots on the ground, who are doing some great research, who are fielding those kinds of things there. There's definitely some sightings here in Florida. And, it really is because the term Pukwudgie just really means like crappy little guy who messes with you. And so it's such a blanket term that the actions of what that Pukwudgie does has been in folklore for thousands of years. It is a leprechaun. You know what I'm saying? It is those little elementals that would mess with people if they strayed from the road. It's all the same lore, right? And so as soon as they go off the path and they go out of the valley or the grass and they go into a forest, all of a sudden it's a Pukwudgie. And so when people have those things and then they Google it and they find what a Pukwudgie is, it makes complete sense with them because there are little things all around us trying to mess with us all the time. Just leave us alone, guys, but they don't.
But then,
I think that we are spending even more time invading the woods. And that always seemed to be the spark for the modern Pukwudgie experience. It wasn't, if you go online and you look at the pictures, they're very vicious and predatory. And the stories don't hold that out, right? Like they're not these monsters roaming the forest. They're like little men of the woods. And so it seems odd to me that it's like they just took a gnome and a chupacabra and smashed them together and said that that's what a Pukwudgie is. And that I always find interesting because I'm like, where are you getting why? There's nothing that says that they tore into anything. So why do they have claws, right? Like I get the porcupine thing because they said that they would, cover themselves with grass and with straw and stuff like that sometimes to hide, or they would do it as they were dancing. And so I get the porcupine thing, but this like vicious teeth, I'm snarling, and the claws, I don't get. The Pukwudgie story has always been, this is my land, you're on that land,
get out,
stay off that land, right? Like back in the day, it was more active. It was, we're going to kill you because you're on our land. But modern ones, like the ones like in the last 50 years, those stories are all people see them in the woods. They have an experience. They're completely freaked out. And then they're kind of taunted by them afterwards. It doesn't involve attacks. It doesn't involve snarling. It doesn't involve ripping flesh or anything like that. And so, when I hear those kinds of reports, I just kind of nod. But it's the weird one. It's the uneasy one that have those old hag type experiences with them that really kind of then draw my attention. I want to go in and talk to the people more about them.
Yeah, even there on the sign, and I'm showing the sign by Freetown State Forest that was put up about our sort of now infamous Pukwudgie population, you can see that kind of porcupine thing going on in the back. And
see, the funny thing is that when people find that image and they find the story, right, that's attached to that image, they read it. And I'm quoted in that story. It's not actually me, but I was asked, like, can I make up any quote and put your name to it? And obviously I trusted Tim Weisberg, who wrote it. And so I said, yeah, of course. No one ever notices that it was written on April 1st. And so it was originally put out there as this intentional fake news on April Fool's Day. So the sign's not real, the situation's not real, and the interviews and like things like that. If you find the article, no one ever bothers to see that it was written on April 1st and it was Tim's joke, you know. Yeah. And I think that they don't realize it because there's such a thing. They actually, it's the weird thing that actually does exist that people have had experiences with. And so it makes complete sense even when you make up a lie about it.
Right. And it's funny because a couple of weeks ago we were talking to another author. His name is John Olson. He's written some good books about ghosts and such things and elemental like creatures. And we got into a pretty good conversation about a creature that was very much like the Pukwudgie is, and had a Native American background and like the whole nine. It was like the Pukwudgie story, but they weren't called Pukwudgies. And he's from Utah. And he writes about that area a lot. And
what were they called? Do you remember what they were called?
I can't remember. It wasn't, it was an odd name like Pukwudgie, but it wasn't Pukwudgie, so it didn't stick with me. But I was like, we know the story.
Well, I mean, because it really is, it's one of those things where you can track the spread of the word, right, by tracking which tribes met in Indiana.
Right.
Okay.
So the tribes that met in Indiana began to talk about them and kind of like, hey, do you got these things going on? And for some reason, the Algonquin word Pukwudgie stuck, right? The same way that we might say monster, right? Or we might say, for example, zombie, right? But there are 23,000 different kinds of zombies. There are fast-running zombies. But this thing that seems to be walking around dead and trying to, eat me. Oh, I've got that too. We call them zombies. You know what I'm saying? Like that kind of thing. And the funny thing is like, of course, zombies, no one actually calls them zombies and anything. They all have their own terms for it, right? But it's a good example of like the kind of thing. It's an umbrella term because even within Massachusetts and New England, my first Pukwudgie experience was with a variety that was furrier, that was said to be, I can't say that I saw it. It was furrier, more hairy, and the hair was red. And that was in New Hampshire. And that was a Pukwudgie experience. Like if you listen to it, all the things, it had the ghost lights, the Tai-Pai-Wunkas that were drawing us into the woods. They had several as we were trying to leave the cemetery. This is Valand Cemetery in Wilton, New Hampshire, if you feel like breaking the law and going in and having your own experience. And it was insane. It was crazy. And it was before the days where like you went out with equipment. It was literally my bachelor party. Let's go find some ghosts. We were originally going to go to Spider Gates. And we got kicked out of Spider Gates after about 2 minutes. Didn't even make it into the woods. Like we're on the path and the car stopped.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, let's go to Vale End because there's these really two ghostly legends. And what I didn't tell the people I was with was there's also these things that are said to attack people there and have put people in the hospital. And, Fiona Broom was writing about this on her Hollow Hill site. That's where I got the information. It became so dangerous and so many people were getting hurt. She took it down for a long time. Look back now, that's a Pukwudgie experience, right? The second time I documented one, it was much more like a gnome. It was wearing a hat, right? It was in the woods. It was in, but the same thing. There was a dark shadow that was in the same area. It had the Tai-Pai-Wunkas. There was this stalking. There was this returning to the person's house a few days later as kind of like a warning to not return. Physically, a very different thing other than the small and intimidating and spooky and creepy thing. Very different, all three. And then you have like kind of the traditional one of like the Wampanoag. they're all Pukwudgies. And so I think that extends to pretty much every culture in the world, and definitely all these different Native American tribes here in America.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
For sure. And they're certainly related. People's experience and what they might look like it might vary. And maybe, in fact, they do vary. I can't tell you because
some people like Waffle House down here. Some people don't. You know what I'm saying? Some people like Bickford's. You know what I'm saying? Like it all depends on where you live.
Sure, Denny's. Anne Marie Young wanted to know: is that near the White Mountains, the Vale Cemetery?
No, it's right. It's right on the edge of Massachusetts.
Just over the line.
Yeah, just over the line.
Excellent. Yeah, and I remember you telling us that bachelor party story.
Yeah.
And
the funny thing is I used to go to Wilton like at least twice a month, which was not near where I was in high school and near Manchester. It's like an hour away from that, right? Because it's good this way across the state. I never knew anything about Van Land. If I had known about Van Land when I was 16, 17 years old, hanging out in Wilton, I would have been out there every weekend. And what happened was one of the other legends that is in that cemetery is of this blue woman who walks the cemetery, and her headstone is said to glow blue. And part of the reason why she's tormented is because her husband, her name was, if I'm not mistaken, Mary Ritter. And when she died, her husband married another woman who became Mary Ritter. And he ended up burying them both in the same plot. Oh. And just kind of switched some of the dates around or whatever. But the headstone was said to glow blue. And so many people were going into, it had nothing to do with Pukwudgie attacks. People were going into that cemetery and chipping off the headstone to see if they took it home, if it would also be blue. And so the police had to lock the cemetery down because there was so much vandalism going on. Because then people were just going, well, here's a Mary, I might as well knock her headstone down too, and things like that.
It's awful. Real quick, I just wanted to say thank you to Donna Lynn. She gave us 50 stars. And thank you to Kim Burley Horn. She gave us 200 stars.
You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Do I get any of this star action, or is that just for you guys?
There's a commission written up in our contract.
I don't even know what stars do.
I'm not too sure either. But
do I get a free trial of stars? Is that what's going on here? Because there are a few shows I want to watch.
We're keeping a savings account that will crack at some point. Yeah. Thank you guys. We do appreciate it. It is really nice of you and kind, and we just like that people do that. That's pretty interesting. We're a couple of questions. I think Linda Judd wanted to know, wasn't that a Pukwudgie that helped Harry Potter? And I think they do mention a Pukwudgie in Harry Potter.
Yeah. Screw her. That bitch. William the Pukwudgie is when the first witch comes over from England and a whole bunch of series of bad things, and she's out in the woods. She encounters this Pukwudgie, which just looks like an old creepy guy, which is actually probably more accurate than the vicious chupacabra Pukwudgie, except for the fact that he's wearing like a suit and stuff like that. And his name's William, and he has one of the things that really makes him non-Pukwudgie, traditionally Pukwudgie, is he has these ears that point out to the side. He looks more like Yoda when it comes to the ears. Pukwudgies usually have almost like a donkey type thing going on. He helps them, and so when she ends up founding Livermore or whatever it's called, he becomes one of the houses, right? So one of the houses in the American version of Hogwarts are all Native American mythical beasts, and so one of the houses actually is Pukwudgie. And the crazy thing about that is that people have accused me of stealing Native American culture. And I'm like, I am literally just telling the story. And I always cite my sources, and I always talk to Wampanoag. And if you can get a Wampanoag to talk about it, all well and good, but they don't. So I'm just, when I put it out there, my intention was to start the discussion about them. But Wampanoags didn't want to talk about it. And they definitely didn't want to talk to me about it. So they say I've stole culture. I'm like, I'm not stealing culture. I'm presenting it. Other people call me the Pukwudgie guy. That's not a name that I made up myself, right? And so the funny thing is that a few years ago, a friend of mine sent me, they had drawn a Pukwudgie and they were selling it. And Warner Brothers blocked it, saying that they have a copyright on all images and folklore having to do with Pukwudgies.
Come on.
Because of the Harry Potter series, which I think is hilarious because
Crazy.
Warner Brothers has never made anything that involves the Pukwudgie, right? Like
No.
it's not in the Mythical Beast series of movies or anything like that. It's just a side part of the Harry Potter lore. But Warner Brothers made her take it down. She couldn't sell her own drawings of Pukwudgies, which they had stolen from a different culture.
Jeez. Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, the other interesting thing is, you know, I always say that, you know, she stole it from me because it's a funny joke. Like, oh, she hasn't stolen it. And she didn't send me a check. She didn't send me any stars. And that's a good joke, and it gets a laugh like when I say it. But one of the tales, one of the ideas that is in the Pukwudgie lore is when Moshop, who's the creator god, when he originally, his wife starts aggravating him, saying, do something about the Pukwudgies, he goes out and he scatters them, right? And when he scatters them, he picks them up, and he, like a handful of them because he's a giant, and he shakes them like crazy, and he throws them to the far ends, which is why there's Pukwudgies in all these different places, right? And he confuses them so much they can't make their way back. So now they're stuck in Maine, and now they're stuck in Vermont, and now they're stuck in Rhode Island because, you know, he drove them crazy and confused them. And if you really are a Harry Potter fan and you've read the books, you'll realize that's exactly what happens in the second book when they go to the Weasley house. And the gnomes are in the yard, and they've got to throw them over the fence to get them out of the garden. And what they have to do first is they have to shake them and confuse them and throw them over the fence so that they don't find their way back because they're too confused to be able to find their ways back to the Weasleys. So
Wow.
she's dipped into Pukwudgie lore more than once.
Wow.
That's really cool.
That's pretty interesting. I didn't know that either. So,
Yeah, you know, Brandon, I don't want to be thrown, and I definitely don't want to be shaken and then thrown. I'm not James Bond here.
Well,
yeah,
Brandon's nickname is the gnome. So,
Oh, is he?
yeah.
He's the human gnome.
He is.
All right. I guess that's the one nickname that's worse than the Pukwudgie guy.
Ours
I
being
don't know,
Bigfoot in the booby.
boobies, so
So, you know,
it's a little worse.
it's a late night snacks, you know. But, yeah, how you doing? Brandon Cooper, also of Shaman Sundays, host of that fine show, which we love and adore. So, as Rihanna says, so she stole it then. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I mean, so
It's a story.
my thing has always been, I didn't steal anything, and I don't mind that people stole from me, right? Like, it's if you don't claim ownership of it, ultimately you would love for people to cite their sources, but it doesn't happen, right? Like, it doesn't, like, no one knows who started Bloody Mary, right? Like it's everyone says they know this origin, that origin, and every time you do, it becomes deeper and deeper and deeper and stuff like that. So no one owns Pukwudgies, right? Did I make money off in the books? I don't know how many people bought Ghosts of the Bridgewater Triangle or Dark Woods because of Pukwudgies. I don't know how many people are going to see Harry Potter movies because of it. I just don't like the blocking of other people spreading the word, you know?
That's not right.
Yeah, like there was a controversy years ago about ownership of the redheaded hitchhiker of Route 44, and whether that was a story that could be owned, right? And so when Charles Robinson wrote that in the New England Ghost Files in 1994, it was the first official like publication of it. And when he wrote that, he put forth that it had been a story that had been around for years, and that he was merely documenting it and telling these people's version of the story and things like that. And then, of course, it blew up, right? Like I would say much more than Pukwudgies, I got noticed because I started collecting modern versions of the redheaded hitchhiker and people who were still having experiences there. And, you know, because I actually could use the internet and had a website, people who were seeing it or experiencing it or had heard whispers of it were finding my site to give me more information, you know, and then it becomes, at some point it changes from the redheaded phantom to the redheaded hitchhiker, right? Like it's the redheaded phantom in the book. I call it the redheaded hitchhiker somewhere along the line, Mandela effect, who knows of like what exactly, like when that switch happened. But years later,
right,
when the tidal wave of not as respectful paranormal writers came around, Charles Robinson didn't like where people were taking that legend and where they were kind of going with it, and he kind of brought up the idea of like, can you own a legend? Like, is that his legend? Because he was the first one to publish on it. Does anybody who discussed that, do they not even just in good form, but also financially, whatever, like, should they have to kick something to him because he was the one that put it forth? And that sparks a great debate. And it's I know where I stand on it. I mean, I think I've told you guys this before. I was taking a ghost tour in Boston, and the tour guide is literally telling me my personal experiences to me about Charles Gate Hotel. And he's like, do you believe that this would happen? And da-da-da-da. And it was amazing because I was handsome and dashing in it. I was thin in his version of the story. It was amazing. Like, he was telling this whole Ouija board story that had happened that I had published years ago, but I was part of the lore of that place. And he's literally telling me, not knowing that I'm the person who he's talking about. And the story was completely different. And I loved it, right? And so it's, that's where I stand on it. Some people are standing the other way. They really want to defend those things. And that's fine. If it's a personal experience, I can see that. But if it's a legend that you uncover and that you craft and then put out for people for like the next generation, you ain't got nothing on it. It ain't yours.
I don't know how you own that. I first heard the hitchhiker story in the late 80s at a party in Rehoboth.
Yeah.
So,
there you go. That's years, like 10 years before the publishing of the book, right? Which is interesting because, what's interesting is the redheaded hitchhiker has always, or redheaded phantom, whichever you want, has always had the label of potentially being almost like a tulpa, right? Like a thought form. Like, Charles Robinson crafted these stories. He invented the eyewitnesses. And it's just such a good story and taps into like a long tradition of hitchhiker ghosts that people started to actually see it. And that no one had ever had an experience or told a story about it until he wrote that book. And then because it was so popular and because it was so universal, it created it. So that's another interesting aspect. I love the redheaded hitchhiker. I miss him.
Yeah.
I wish he'd come down here.
Yeah, and I guess we should probably tell that story because I'm sure some of the people listening to us right now actually don't know it. It's a redheaded.
Oh, the redhead. Okay, yeah. So down Route 44 in Rehoboth, right on the Rehoboth-Seekonk line, and of course, that location changes dramatically. There is a redheaded hitchhiker seen on the side of the road, and he's dressed in brown pants and he's wearing a flannel shirt. Sometimes he's very neat. Other times he's completely disheveled and his red hair and beard are all over the place and his shirt's untucked. And people have been experiencing him for decades in this area. And as they're driving down the road, they'll see him and they'll swerve so that they don't hit him, or they'll, sometimes they'll drive straight through him. Some people have actually picked him up. And then he is kind of like looked at them and he has these kind of dead eyes and then disappears. One of the best stories, one of my favorite stories, is that they ran through him, and then the car kind of died, and they started to hear him laughing over the radio, and he was taunting the woman. So as the guy went to go get help, she's there in the car, and he starts to appear on the radio and taunt her. People driving down that road at high speeds are said to see him even like in the window or in their back seat. Just classic roadside ghost kind of legends. And then over the time of covering it, so like that's kind of like the core lore, if you will. And then as other things started to become popular in the paranormal, all of a sudden dark men with hats became popular, and he was now wearing a hat sometimes in the stories. Or there was a ritual added to it that if you went to the Rehoboth-Seekonk line and you turned off your car and you flashed your lights 3 times, he would appear. Or that if you were driving with 3 people in the car at a specific time, the time, of course, now is 3 a.m., but at the time it was midnight, he'll appear in the one empty seat with you. And so what's great about the story is it has just enough truth to it and just enough people who have these random wispy experiences on that stretch of road that it makes sense. And it's such an archetype and it's such a skeleton for every roadside ghost that you've heard, is that every possible legend that has to do with the road gets attached to the red-headed hitchhiker, like the honking of the horn and the flashing of the lights and the back seat, the empty seat. All those are, other stories told in other locations that the location itself is very similar to Route 44, and the stories are very similar to the red-headed hitchhiker, and therefore, well, I remember hearing that, so yeah, it had to have been the red-headed hitchhiker that you do that with, and so all of a sudden it becomes part of his story too.
It becomes lumped together in some way.
Yeah,
and it's kind of a dark stretch of road, especially going back in time. As we were growing up, very few street lights. It's kind of dark. It's kind of a main road. It runs parallel with a highway that people would use now if they were, say, going to Providence, Rhode Island, right? You would go down 44, and there's some stretches there where it's kind of dark. Goes by Anawan Rock.
I was going to say it's right next to Anawan Rock, really. So
yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, which is haunted all on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And,
scarification of the land, yes.
Yeah, it certainly is, and lots of legends surrounding that.
Which brings up the next question Jack has.
Yes, Mr. Kilowatt has a question for you. And I think we were talking about this a little bit in the front of the show. Question for the guest. We know that places can be haunted and even fields, but is there a possibility that the land was haunted / evil before events took place there, as in the land was the cause?
Yep, 100%. Totally. Yes. Probably the biggest shift that I've had, and I have no reason for why that is. So I can't answer the why. I can answer the is, but I can't answer the why. The biggest shift that I've had in my thinking of the Bridgewater Triangle since I left Massachusetts, especially, for a lot of people, this is interesting. This has been my life for like 25 years. I've been researching this and telling these stories and documenting this stuff, and not even being there for the last 15, still getting this information and looking out as an outsider, which I always was. I'm a Boston kid. That's not Boston, bro. If you're listening to this and you're not from Massachusetts, there's a world of difference between Freetown and Fall River and Boston. Like, they're not the same place. And so I was always an outsider, but I'm even more of an outsider now. And the one conclusion that I've come to is that the Freetown State Forest is a living, breathing thing. It is itself an elemental. It is hungry. It's sly. There was recently an episode of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, that was filmed there, right? I have personally been contacted, let's say 4 dozen times, about documentaries or episodes of a TV show looking to be the Bridgewater Triangle, and it never works out, right? It's popular just enough to have mystique, but it never gets exposed like these other famous places like the Skinwalker Ranch or, the Bermuda Triangle or other places. The Bridgewater Triangle, but the Freetown Forest specifically, is an evil creature. It's not a bunch of trees. Why that is, I don't know, but it has a consciousness, I totally believe. And so that energy we were talking about earlier that brings things in, it's the Venus flytrap aspect of its personality, right? Like, everyone always wants to say that person was a narcissist after they've been in a relationship for 3 years, right? But they still were in the relationship for 3 years. Like, there's something cunning and appealing and drawing in, and you think that you're using the forest as energy because your intention is stronger there. The spells you cast there are more powerful. the rituals you do there seem to be more intense in this forest, and you can't explain why, but the whole time it's using you. And so I think, and the mere fact that you can keep peeling back that onion and digging that hole, what caused the Bridgewater Triangle? Okay, well, it was the wampum belt, right? Okay, well, it wasn't the wampum belt, it was King Philip's War. Well, King Philip's War itself is a symptom of the Bridgewater Triangle. And they didn't want the Freetown State Forest anyway. The Freetown Purchase, they were like, haha, you idiots. Don't you know that place is evil? It's cursed. We don't want to go there, right? It's like not only the Hockomock Swamp, but also the Freetown Forest. They were laughing. You want the money for this huge stretch of land where evil things happen? Go ahead, take it. And so it extends to every person who's ever spent time there that it's evil, right? So you can't just simply say bad things happen there or energy stays there or there's a cause and effect. The thing is just friggin' evil, and it's living and it's breathing and it wants you, and it wants to be just popular enough to draw people in and be spoken about. It's kind of like they talk about the 3 deaths, the death when you die, the death when the last person you knew die, and the last time your name is spoken, right? Freetown ain't going away because people are still talking about it. And so I kind of feel like that popularity, but not overexposure, is actually some kind of sinister plan that it actually has.
That's great. And it's like an animist point of view, to look at it and say, all right, the forest itself has its own consciousness. I think Mr. Cooper, if he's still on, would probably agree with that, being a shaman.
Yeah.
That is like the point of view that things can have a consciousness of their own that maybe, is a human or a pet or whatever.
Tiger burning bright. And it's funny because when I originally started working on the Ocala book, I had that mindset that I was looking at Freetown 2.0. And what I realized was that Ocala is a lot worse, but Ocala is not necessarily a living, breathing thing. It's much more this kind of train station to different dimensions and different little pocket places. I don't think that the Freetown Forest is that. It's not that. It's a monster. It's an animal. Whereas the Ocala, even though I wanted it to be that because I understood that and I could process that, as I started to do it, I started to realize, oh no, this is just like South Station, but in a forest, and it's different dimensions and different pocket places, and not trains and buses.
Right.
I just made a South Station reference for people who aren't from the area. They don't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
I think you can use context clues.
They'll figure it out.
Yeah.
They certainly will when they go to Boston. So no, that's pretty cool. Did you have a book that was your favorite to write that stands out?
Yeah, I loved writing haunted objects, just because I was so loving that folklore. And I loved the idea of wrapping these true stories into folklore context. I'm really enjoying writing the kids' book about the Ocala, because the biggest criticism that I get is that I'm long-winded, my sentences are too long, and I put too much folklore in there, like too much analysis, right? This is literally like take scary stories to tell in the dark and place it in the Ocala. And so I'm able to get that like creepy crouch like this over a campfire feel to it. And so I'm really enjoying writing that book right now.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
That's cool. And I'm just going to share your Amazon page real quick.
Beautiful.
And
that's a good picture.
Yeah, Linda Judd wanted to know about the movies, where she can find them, see them, and
the movies. I think she was asking if Chris had something to do with the movies, and I don't think you didn't
Which
do
movies?
The Triangle documentary.
Yeah, I'm in it.
You're in it, but
Yeah.
I don't think you are the maker of it, but you're in.
No,
it.
that's Aaron Caju. Like I worked closely with him and stuff like that, and Aaron's a good friend. But yeah, that's all Aaron and Manny Fulmore, whose name I'm mispronouncing.
it's okay.
There you go. So there's some of your books there. Dark Woods is about those very woods. Ghosts of the Bridgewater Triangle, great book.
See that they have. See how nice that cover of Haunted Objects is. Click on that Haunted Objects book. You can't buy it, but you can look at that beautiful cover.
You do have a new and beautiful cover on there.
Look at that. Look at that. And you'll probably never see it. But I've got a box. I've got 3. Look at that. Look at it. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that. How modern.
Let me see. I think I got the original.
Yeah.
It's too bad you can't click inside. You can see just how ridiculously small the printing is. It's hilarious.
Jeez. I think we do have an original.
We do.
You do. Yeah.
Here it is. I got it.
Oh, you got the original eyeball one?
There's the eyeball one.
Look at that. Look at that. Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of like the original, but the new one is really cool too.
I like the original better too. But I love that we got a friend of ours to do that, and she does amazing work. But if you flip through that book, the way that they formatted it, you just like flip through the book and just like show random pages. It feels like the ghost book version of the Inquirer. It's like so overly flashy. If you know my personality, I'm so laid back. I'm like, can't I just write it in pencil there? Like, and so to see like those pages where it's like splash and a dead woman hanging from a tree, and you're like, wow, that's not even a story. Why is that picture there? I don't like what they did with that book, but I still love the actual contents of the book.
That's awesome.
Oh, we started off, we were going to talk about ghostly curses. Was there a particular curse or something around Friday the 13th, which we're fast approaching, that we wanted to get into the show and talk about?
It's the curse of really bad movies. I got to be honest with you. Like, I'm pretty much burnt out at this point. I'm like, I can't even like wrap my head back around to curses. I literally was burnt out. I did curses, and then I was on an NPR show earlier, and she's like, tell me these. And so I told her these 2 stories. And when I finished the 2 stories, she said, I really enjoy this. Hey, by the way, I'm going to the event tomorrow, and I'm kind of be like your MC, like co-host, like, introduce you and stuff. And so I had to rush home that night. You guys delayed the show a little bit. Thank heavens. I had to rush home, be here at 8, and realize I had to change the presentation because this girl knew all the stories that I just told her the stories that were in the presentation. And so I've been like running around because there's, at what point do you call a haunting a curse? And what term does it have to be someone says, I curse you, and therefore like that's what causes the haunting? Or do you look back and you say the same thing keeps happening in the same location? Is it a curse? Is there something weird going on like that?
It'd have to be a level of negativity, I imagine, maybe even a death, I would think too.
I've got 2 stories of women who, different sides of the Ocala, who both do something bad and are punished by becoming half human, half animal, right? And now one is an owl. She's a Seminole vampire witch owl, right? Like, and she roams the Ocala on this side of the Ocala, right? And then on the other side, there's a coyote woman who, after her father committed this horrible racist act, she kills her father and then commits suicide. And she transforms into this half coyote, half woman. And she's stalking this side of the forest and doing the same thing. She's killing men who are bad. She's abducting people and drawing them into the woods. And so it's like, are those curses? Like, if you can present that story easily as these 2 women are cursed. And so, I think there has to be, if not murder, then at least it's got to be these bad acts, right? It has to be, it's almost like for it to be a curse, the average person or someone with some certain quality has to fall into the booby trap, right? Otherwise, it's just a haunting. But if it's one of those things where it's like, therefore, on certain nights, these kinds of people have this thing happen, that's when you start to get like, okay, the narrative seems a lot more like a curse.
That's really well put. Joshua Dixon wanted to know if you got any damage from the tornadoes last night.
Me?
Yes.
No, I'm nowhere. I'm in Southwest Florida. I think that those were more in like the Jacksonville area, or they were in like Tampa and stuff like that.
Yes.
So no, nothing at all. Nothing at all. I was not even touched. As a matter of fact, it's been absolutely beautiful here. I mean, it's horrible weather. Like 90-degree hot wind, like
Humid.
nothing I've ever felt before. It was crazy. But tonight's been absolutely beautiful with the lightning. And that's the best part of Southwest Florida is the lightning. And I was watching football and I turned off the football because the way that it was flying across the sky was so ridiculously beautiful that I was in awe. And my son came out and said, like, can you calm down, please? I'm trying to sleep. I've got work tomorrow. And I'm like, no, I can't. Like, this is the forces of nature and it's insanely beautiful.
Victoria Monday, I see it's not coming up. Oh, it is now. Okay. She said, sorry, Southerner here. Just what is it Ocala?
I think she means Ocala.
Ocala.
So for the book, because we've got that book back there too,
Yeah.
but I can't find it because I've got about 2,000 books back there. I'm reading at least.
How are my books not the ones that are in the front? I don't know. The Ocala, Ocala, is it's a national forest. So it's the Ocala National Forest. It's probably an hour north of Orlando, probably a little bit more, like an hour and a half north of Orlando. And it stretches pretty much across the state, though even the parts of it that aren't the forest, I consider the Ocala, because I think like its fingers stretch kind of in all directions, like we were talking about with the triangle. So I always refer to the Ocala as the entire area. So people who are from the town of Ocala, so there's a town Ocala, there's the Ocala National Forest, and then there's the Balzano Ocala. And so it's all of this place that's, you know, like I said, it's probably about an hour, hour and a half outside of Orlando.
Yeah, you know.
The more you know.
The more you know.
But again, it's funny. Like she was just saying she's a Southerner. I'm like, I'm a guy from Boston writing stories about this very Southern, you know, when you go to places like Tampa, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Naples, even like that's near me, we think of those as Florida, and they're not, or Orlando, right? Those are not Florida. Like those are not the complexion of Florida. Florida is, I always say, people say Central Florida is this way, like where Orlando is. It's this way because once you get off the coast in these places like the Ocala or the Green Swamp, which is where Sumter County is, it's a totally different feel to it. And everyone there has lived in that town or lived in that area for probably most of their lives. Whereas like, you know, in other parts of Florida, you don't have that same kind of generational thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Linda says she picked up the Haunted Ocala National Forest.
So
love reading it on the Kindle.
Joshua, I'm not sure if you picked up, if he's listening to the beginning of the show, but he's actually referring to Brooksville, which was the town I was talking about at the beginning.
Oh yeah, there he goes. Have you
been?
To
yeah, yes, Brooksville, ridiculously haunted. Yeah, have I been to Brooksville? It's literally the one of the side tangents of the book that I'm writing right now, and it is one of the creepiest places I've ever been to. It's I don't want to offend Joshua if he knows people there or whatever. Every time I start talking about Brooksville, people like kind of take a few steps back from me. It's not a very nice place in general. Forget about the ghosts. It's not a very nice place. And I have to actually change my presentations when I'm anywhere near there because I don't want Brooksville people to be offended by some of the things that I say. It has any town that proudly hails its haunted hanging trees where they lynched people is not necessarily the most pleasant place. You know, and the May Stringer house is in the book, and it's part of this, the idea of the commercialization of the paranormal versus these people who won't talk about the paranormal, and they literally are right across the river from each other, and the two different cultures that develop. So, you know, we went to Spring Hill Cemetery in Brooksville once again when there was lockdown, because there is a legend in this cemetery about a hanging man who was lynched, and it's an African American cemetery. And they supposedly brought this person and they hung him from the tree that's in the middle of that cemetery. And we went there, and I didn't tell my kids any of the backstory. And we had at this point been to, half a dozen places like in the last 2 weeks when you couldn't go anywhere else. And the kids immediately were like, "Oh no, we're leaving here. I don't like this place." They got a bad vibe from it. And we went to leave, and there were literally handprints on the back of my car. Of someone trying, and so immediately I took the snapshot of it, and then I compared it to when we took a picture of the kids when we got there. Like I took a picture of the kids and I, and you can see the bumper and you can see the back of the car, and then afterwards with these handprints, these these dust prints like slamming the back of the car. It was interesting. Wow. It's not a fun place.
No, it doesn't sound fun at all.
No. But very interesting.
Very, yes.
Very interesting.
Very.
So,
that's great.
So Joshua, stay tuned for the book. So for that book, it's a really kind of an interesting exploration.
We talk about roles a lot, and that ghosts or spirits seem to fall into some of these roles as being a reason why we hear so much folklore about things like the woman in white. Or like you mentioned, the headlights, like that's a big one, right?
Right.
There aren't many towns that don't have some legend where you pull up your car in a cemetery or to this whatever wall, flash your lights 3 times, and something will appear.
Yeah,
I'm sure our audience has heard a lot. What do you think of that? Why do you think we hear these repeating stories, these kind of roles that spirits may be playing?
Yeah, I think, and roles is a really good word for it. I think. What it is the paranormal is real, supernatural is real. These things happen, right? Ghosts are real. Whatever I say, I care less whether you think it or not. Anyone else thinks it or not. There are natural things that happen that we can't explain, that have an intelligence or human or form or humanity to it. Ghosts, right? That's not supposed to happen, right? That's the blip in our radar. That's the blip in our world. And so if we experience it, whether it's individually or as a community, we need to process it. And we process it by putting it through the filters that we know. So to make the known unknown, or to make the unknown known, we have to be able to connect it to a story that makes sense to us, right? And so if we see a man, if there's a story of a man that people see this weird shadow hanging from a bridge, 95% of the time it's going to be a man who came home from war to find his girlfriend had cheated on him, because that's a story we know. We've heard it before, right? So we can process the weirdness and maybe the freak outness of the paranormal experience by understanding it, because we can understand the story. So we feel like we have some kind of control on the supernatural, but the idea of the supernatural is that it can't be controlled, right? So it's us putting what's comfortable on what is uncomfortable to us.
Trying to humanize it and that sort of thing.
Yeah, because it's
Newtonian physics angle. Like
I can't understand religion, right? It's a huge concept, but if I can write religious texts and understand them and codify it, then it makes sense to me, right? I can't get love, but I can read a romance novel, right? It's like we understand things if they become familiar to us, and if we can compartmentalize it and put it into a story. And keep in mind, once it becomes a story, it's someone else's problem, right? It's like what do you call it? That episode of Evil or like a Ring, right? If I make the videotape and I give it to you, it's your shit now, right? Like you got to deal with it.
No, you take it now. It's your
you
problem.
Play that thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's the same kind of thing. Like, it's something bad happens to us. We want to tell it for the sympathy and to get the vibe out there to other people, to dissipate it a little bit. And I think ghost stories do that.
Yeah. Bob says, I think that these stories keep that warning part of our brain, so we remember being scared of the dark or the unknown, or etc. And that's a good point. I think maybe it's a way so that you just like, hey, I got to stay away from that. Kind of like handing off that videotape.
Yeah. I think that's why I'm not a big fan. even though I was part of it, of the paranormal investigator movement and the paranormal TV movement, was that it took the awe away. You know, it took the respect and the awe away and the fascination away. And it became something that not only everybody could do, which is fine, go out and do what you want to do, but more of it made ghosts mundane. It made ghosts something that could be, categorized and documented and put into a category, into a series of bleeps and things like that. And it killed the innocence and the awe of the dark, right? And of those creepy things and of the things that scare us and the things that might be out there, and the humanization. You know, if all it is if all we are is energy and we could document that energy, well, then what happened to the soul? You know, and those stories are stories of soul, and paranormal investigating is a story of energy. And which one is more interesting to you when you want to be creeped out, and which one connects to you more?
Right.
Well, one of the things you advocate, and we've talked about this, and I want our audience to know that maybe didn't see this, and I know it's late, Chris. I know we're not going to keep you too much longer, but it's Tripping on Legends. And here's your website, and you want people to go check out Tripping on Legends.
Hey, there's that vampire owl.
Yeah,
I see her little feet.
The Stakini, right?
The Stakini, yep.
The Stakini and the bikini. And it's the idea of having an experience, a paranormal experience, more so than saying, hey, I'm going to measure everything.
Right.
And we're going to stop and worry about the recorders and have 18 tons of gear. It's going to take us 2 hours to unload the truck. It's more like, hey, let's just go have the experience.
Right.
And I think that gets overlooked a lot of times because we get stuck because of the shows, because of the commercialization of the paranormal, thinking we got to measure it. We got to have these devices. We got to have all these things. And not that they're not fun, because we like them too. But something can get lost in that.
It's funny. Like, even if you look at that, if people are looking at the picture and they see that like little yellow house, that's Lillian Place, right? And so there's been a story about the bridge that leads to Lillian Place and the house itself, since the house was built, right? And it predates Daytona being Daytona. Like, it was like that island that it's on, that was like one of the first houses built. There was no bridge. They had to take all the materials, right? And since the bridge was built, and there's been 3 of them, there has been someone walking across that bridge. And there has been a ghost that vanishes, and it sometimes gets stopped. All the classic like hitchhiker type stuff. It's a woman, and she's in this black, cape and everything, like a right. And Lillian Place is the same thing, right? It has all these crazy ghost stories, and the ghost stories have always been Lucille, right? And a woman who's now Lillian lived there. She is said to haunt it as well. If people can see like above, there are different stories, but she would look down, especially from that widow's peak that's up the top there, right? And people would wake up to this other ghost called Lucille, who'd literally say, I'm Lucille. Everything's going to be like, don't worry, I'm sorry if I bothered you. Pouring water, vacuuming the house, doing all this crazy stuff, right? And people did investigating, and they got an EVP that said the word Lucy. And for years, people have had personal experiences that talk about Lucille. So they associate Lucille being on the bridge, on the road as well, because there was a man who had a near-death experience, and Lucille took him up to the tower and everything. As soon as an investigator got an EVP that said the word Lucy, the whole lore changed, right? They stopped calling her Lillian. They stopped calling her Lucille, and it was now Lucy, Lucy, Lucy. And so how arrogant of us to think that, other investigators went in there, had no experiences, and claimed that, declared that this house had no ghosts. Forget 150 years of ghost stories. I was there for a night. There are no ghosts in this place. And another part of it was that they got an EVP that said the name Lucy, and they changed the name of the ghost, right? And so it's one of those interesting things where it's like, how arrogant we are to think that our little pocket of when we experience the paranormal can erase years, if not centuries, of lore. and we do, and the paranormal investigation movement did a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a
now
great.
You're just scrolling through my page, so that's
I want people to see it.
Now you're just stalking me.
Hi, Greg.
We are stalking. What's up, Mr. Koss? Well, welcome to Dark Horse Paranormal.
Yes.
With Christopher Balzano. Are you doing your podcast, and is it on a regular schedule right now?
Yeah, it's no on the regular schedule part. It's always in my head, and it's always something that I want to do. I haven't been able to do it for probably about 6 months. My co-host is on her own journey right now. That's a nice way of saying it. And so it's kind of like I put her on hold because she's a crucial member of the team, and I'm waiting to see if she wants to come back, and you know what I'm saying. So it's kind of like like in the Boondock Saints when he says we're like 7-Eleven, we're always open, but we're not always doing business. It's that was a horrible Irish accent, but it's the same kind of idea. Like my notebooks are still filling up with what the episodes will be. The episodes just haven't been recorded or done yet. So it's coming back in one way or another. It doesn't die. It can't die. It's been on for too long. It's gone through too many changes to not evolve.
Right.
Excellent. Yeah. The other episodes of it, I think you can probably still find on podcast outlets.
Yep. It's on everything that you can possibly imagine. It's even now, which it wasn't maybe even last time we talked, it's on Stitcher. It's on Spotify now as well. So it really is. You can totally get sick of me if you really desire to consume as much Balzano as you can.
Excellent. So Tripping on Legends is the name of that. And you want to look that up on the website. You want to look that up on your podcast outlets. The books are on Amazon. Come highly recommended by us because we've read them and loved them. And you're an actual writer, right? So I think a lot of people write paranormal books that don't know how to write a book. And
I think you would find enough people that read my books that say I don't know how to write a book either, but I'm getting better, I swear. Eventually, by the time I'm 90, And if anyone's in Southwest Florida, please visit the website facebook.com/Tripping on Legends as well, because chances are I'm going to be somewhere near your town in the next 2 weeks, with the events I'm doing and things like that.
Excellent. Well, we really appreciate you coming on, and I know we've kept you up past your bedtime, and it sounds like you've had a pretty long day.
I only have to get up. In 4 hours for school, so I'm good.
That's right. Chris is a teacher, in case you didn't know, so he'll be up bright and early.
Yes,
finishing his
4:30 every morning to walk the dog to get everything going. So,
oh, good Lord.
Well, as always, we love that you came on and love talking.
Thank you very much for having me. I always love talking to you guys. You guys are so good to chat with.
We've had a blast. We want to stick around. We're just going to wrap things up and
sounds good.
Thank you. Well, that's all the time we have for tonight. This has been fun. We hope you guys are enjoying your October, your spooky season. And we'll be back. We're thinking about bringing back some Saturday shows, maybe even. If you guys want us to do a show on Saturday again, let us know. Till the next one, stay safe and be cool. We'll see you later.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.